Hello everyone, this is Anish Kumar Singh. I'm an IT professional, and this video is chapter 1 of Python series, A to Z Python series, where we will be discussing about basics of Python. Last जो chapter था, chapter 0 था जो हमारा, there we have discussed about different platforms basically where we can learn Python, where we can code Python. And in last video series only we have decided that I'll be doing rest of the series in Jupyter Notebook. Today we'll be discussing about character set and tokens in Python. These two forms the building block of Python programming languages. Okay, Python program language. After that, we'll be talking about naming convention for variable. How do we name a variable? Then we'll talk about indentation in Python. This is very important topic, indentation in Python. जितने भी scope define होते हैं Python में, जो the scope which we define in Python is using indentation. And after that, we'll talk about dynamic typing in Python. We'll talk about basic data types in Python. What are the basic data types in Python? And we'll also talk about an important function called type. This inbuilt function is used to know the data type of any variable or object. And after that, we'll talk about a concept of IPO in programming languages. Okay, so let us proceed. Let us talk about character set first. कि character set क्या होता है भाई साहब? एक बात बताओ. Think of an English language. ठीक है? तो in English language, what are the characters which English language understand or recognizes? It understands alphabets. It only understands alphabets. Apart from alphabets, it does not understand any more characters. Okay, so English language understand or recognizes capital A to Z and a small a to Z. Python language also recognizes certain characters, and the set of all those characters is known as character set. So what are those characters? Those characters are alphabets, uppercase and lowercase both, as I have described in this table. Those characters are digits. Python understands digits. Python also understands special symbols. These are those special symbols which Python understands. We basically use this symbol in comparison operations and all. It understands white spaces, and it also understands other Unicode and ASCII. We'll talk about Unicode and ASCII in our next video, where we will be talking about string. Okay, so these are character sets in Python programming language. Now let us understand about tokens. What are tokens? So basically there are 4 kinds of token. पहला हमारा होता है कीवर्ड, दूसरा आइडेंटिफायर, थर्ड इज लिटरल एंड कांस्टेंट, एंड फोर्थ इज स्पेशल लिटरल. Talking first about keywords, what are keywords? Keywords are words whose meaning has already been defined by Python, जिसको आप फिर से डिफाइन नहीं कर सकते. You cannot redefine keywords. For example, the word boy in English language has already been defined. You cannot redefine this word boy. Second, identifiers. Identifiers are basically names. Now there are different entities in Python programming language. अगर आप आगे पढ़ोगे, you'll come to know there are functions in Python, there are classes in Python, there are variables in Python. So identifiers are name of those entities. For example, my identifier is what? My name. Literals. Literals are constant whose values do not change over time. And third, special literal. So in other programming languages, you have null. Null means nothing. So in Python, you have none. Instead of null, you have none in Python, and none means nothing. Okay. So what have we covered? We have covered what character set, and we have covered tokens. Now let us move forward and understand naming convention for variable. Python, there are certain rules to name a variable. We'll talk about this. But before we talk about the rules to name a variable, we need to understand what are variables in itself. So variables are nothing but you can think of variable as a container where we can store value, where we can keep value. Okay. Okay. Now let us write a simple program, and using that program we'll try to understand again keywords, where keywords are coming in our program, where variables are coming in our program, where constants are coming in our program. Okay. So the program we are going to write is going to take an input from user. Then it will see if the input is even or odd. Okay. So what we need to do first, we need to take a input from user, and we very well know to take an input from user we have to use the function input. What are we gonna ask from user? We are gonna ask from user that please enter a number, and now we'll store this number in a variable. Lower case का use किया है, which is a convention. I have not used any symbol, I have not used any keyword as a variable name. Okay, and I have also not used any space in my variable name. Okay, now what this will do, this will take whatever user will input, it will store in this variable. Now one more thing I have discussed in last class, which is casting. Whatever we get from user is in the form of string, and this int will convert it into an integer. Now let us talk about logic first. How would we know if a number is even or odd? कैसे पता चलेगा? We very well know कि अगर if any number leaves 0 as a remainder when divided by 2, then that number is even, otherwise it is odd. So if a num, this is called remainder operator, it gives us remainder when divided by 2. This operator, if this number is divided by 2, and this operator, if you'll use this operator, this gives the remainder. Okay, if we know that if this comes out to be 0, then that number would be even, otherwise it would be odd. Okay, so we'll check using a keyword if the value of this is equal to 0. If this is true, then what we have to print, what we have to show to user, we have to show to the user that this number is even, otherwise else what we have to print, this number is odd. Very simple. Now this is what, this is an identifier, this is what, this is a keyword, this is also what, a keyword. What is it asking? It is asking for a number. Suppose that number is 20. Hit enter. So the output is this number is even. Let us execute it once again. Control enter, and suppose this time I am taking 25. What should be the result? The result should be this number is odd. This number is odd. Okay, we can do the same thing using a function as well. Let us define a function. This is what, this is used for defining a function. Okay, this is also keyword, and after that we need to give a name of that function, that is identifier. So let us give this function an identifier even number. It will accept a number as a parameter, and then again we'll do what, we'll check if this number percentage 2, it returns 0. It means what? It means it is an even number. We print even. Else what we need to print? We need to print odd number. Okay, let us execute this. What for execution, what we need to call this, we'll call this even number. We need to call this, and what number we will pass? Suppose I am passing 20. We are not taking any number from user, I am only passing 20. Let us execute this even number. Now if I pass 25, odd number. Okay, so here this program also, this is what, this is an identifier, this is what, this is a keyword. This is keyword, this is keyword, and all understand that every program in Python is made up of what? Is made up of tokens and a character set, which are the building blocks of Python language. Now, moving forward, what we need to discuss? We need to discuss about indentation in Python. Let's now move to understanding indentation in Python. What is indentation in Python? This is the reason, this is very much important to understand, because this is the reason why many people find Python confusing or messy. So let us understand. In order to make you understand what I have done, I have written the same program in Python. Sorry, I have written the same program in Java. Okay, this is the program in Java which actually does the same thing. It takes a number from user and it displays whether that number is even or odd. Okay, so look at this function even odd. After this function, we have used opening bracket and then you have used closing bracket. What this opening and closing bracket does, it basically defines what things, what codes comes under this function even odd. Everything which is written under this opening and closing bracket comes under what? Comes under even odd. Think of it in terms of ownership. So this function even odd is the owner of everything which is written between this opening bracket and closing bracket. Think in that way. Okay. Now think of this if statement. After is if statement, we have used what? We have used opening bracket and then we have closed it. So whatever written this opening bracket and closing bracket is belongs to what statement? Belongs to this statement if. If I write one more statement here, that statement will also belongs to if. So if is the owner of everything which is written between this opening bracket and closing bracket. So this opening bracket and closing bracket is defining the scope of this if statement. So we can comfortably say that in Java, opening bracket and closing bracket is used to define the scope of any expression. Okay, but in Python, we don't have this opening and closing bracket to define the scope or ownership of any expression. In Python, we have indentation to do the same. The number equal to if this enum, this is what? This is an expression. This is what? This is an expression. If this enum %2 equal to 0, what do we want? This is an expression and we want this expression to be the owner of which statement. To define that, we use indentation to write in this line belongs to this expression if. Like in Java, everything you write between this opening bracket and closing bracket belongs to this expression if. Does not matter in which line you write this. The space matters. Whatever comes under this line. For example, suppose I write print even number. Again, I write print. So this print statement is exactly below this. It is in the same line. So everything which falls under this, everything which starts with the same line belongs to this if. Now if I write again even number, again everything which I'm writing is what? Is at an equal distance with this if, and these statements belongs to this statement if as an imaginary line, and everything which is written which is starting from this line comes under the scope of this statement if. This expression is the owner of all these statements which falls under this line. Now this else statement is not under this if. This else has escaped the scope of if statement. Now after colon, if I do enter, now whatever we write in this line becomes the scope of what? Else. Now if I write print odd, So this imaginary line, all imaginary, every statement which starts from here belongs to which now? Belongs to this else state. This is indentation. Let us indentation more complex the programs become. Suppose here I have written one more if a num percentage 4 equal to 0. I have used one more indentation. Now everything, look this space, look at this space, equidistant space. Now everything we write here belongs to the scope of what? Belongs to this expression if, and this if falls under the scope of this upper if, and everything we write here even number and divisible by 4. Every statement every statement in this line will come under the scope of this if statement. Okay, let us execute this and take number as 20. So it is even number, and then it also comes under the scope of this if statement. So this will execute this as well, and then these two comes under the scope of this upper if. So this indentation, this is what? This is indentation, the space we are leaving act similar to this opening bracket and closing bracket. This is what you need to understand. It's very simple. Give indentation by yourself. For example, here I will write the same program. Suppose I am taking num equal to int and then input, enter the number. Okay, and after that you'll use if enum percentage 2 equal to 0. Now here if you do colon and enter, you are not getting that indentation by yourself, like in Jupyter Notebook. In Jupyter Notebook, when you are using this code, if enum percentage 2 equal to 0, now when you'll do colon and enter, you'll get indentation. You are getting indentation by yourself, this space. So in that case, you can use tab to give indentation, or you can also use 4 space or 2 space based on your need to give indentation, and you write down your code here. Print even. Print even. So everything which will maintain this line of space with this if will be under what? Will be under this if statement. So if I write again, no, you cannot. If you write anything now, if I write print over here, this print now, this print is not under the scope of this if statement. To make this print statement under the scope of this if statement, what you need to do, you need to give this space. Now this print is under the scope of this if here it is not under the scope of if. I have told you before, every statement which will be in this line, which will be having same distance from this if, will be under the scope of if.